dream speech tends to get all the press, to get all the publicity. And yet when you begin to dig into King's other speeches, I think there is so much more, so much depth, so much to be learned, so much wisdom for our day. This one struck me, his sermon from Luke 12, why Jesus called a man a fool. Jesus called this man a fool because, as King says, he allowed the means by which he lived to outdistance the ends for which he lived. He went on to say that we live in two realms, the within and the without. So often, perhaps too often or even more often than we would like to admit, we fixate on what is outside ourselves, the without of our lives. These include our cars, our homes, our vehicles, our clothing, our jewelry, our jobs, our appearance, all those things that others see that create an image of who we are. Yet when we focus on that which is without of us, we lose sight of what is within us. King points out that the rich man in this parable used the words I and my 15 times out of 60 words. 1/4 of his speech was dedicated to me, to I, to the self. He lost sight of the bigger picture. When we look at this parable that Jesus told, this farmer had had a banner crop. I'm not a farmer, I'm more of an urban person. But I know that in farming there are a lot of ups and downs. There are years that hail destroys the whole crop and there's nothing. There's years where it's a drought and you get a meager crop and you maybe just get enough to buy seed for the next year. So I'm sure this farmer was ecstatic when he, in this particular year, had a banner year. A crop to beat all crops. A windfall of wealth and cash. This crop was so big, it was bigger than all his barns could hold. And so he began to think, how can I hold this crop? How can I wrap my arms around this wealth through the crop? And he decided he would build bigger barns and bigger silos so he could store it all up. You notice the focus in that. How can I add more wealth? There is no mention of the others around him. There is no mention of the laborers who had to probably work extra hard to harvest that yield and what their lives entailed, where they went at the end of a long day. There's no mention of those in his community who may be in need. He only thought about how he could maximize his profits for that year. It's easy when we read these parables to throw stones at the people that Jesus called a fool, to say, oh, they're bad and we're not like them at all. But when we really look in our own lives, sometimes we're more like those characters than we would like to admit. I must confess, as I reflect on some moments in my life, I'm embarrassed to say that I have some of those tendencies. I don't know how many of you watched, as I did, with some anticipation, the whole fiscal cliff at the end of the year, and what the Congress would do, and what the president would do, and how that would affect people. Perhaps you did. I happened to watch it quite a bit. And as always, I was looking at that with my own self-interested eye. How will that affect me? How will that affect my family, my business, my wealth? When it all shook out in those late night deals and it began to come out in the next few days, how the deal had come down, I began to read what it would do, how it would affect people, or more specifically myself. And generally I was pretty pleased. As a small business owner, I thought, this isn't going to have a big effect on me. I'm pretty excited here. I'm not going to get nailed with a lot more taxes. I'm not going to get hit with certain penalties or certain things that would maybe diminish my own wealth. And once I figured that out, I kind of went back about my business. Went back about my ways. It wasn't until I was working with some of our employees. We run a janitorial company. So these folks work hard. Many of them, it's a second job. And they began explaining how upset they were about the 2%. There had been a rollback of 2% on payroll taxes, the FICA part of those taxes, and how that was expiring. And therefore, the government would take back that 2%. I hadn't thought of that from the business standpoint because the business paid the full taxes even when there was a rollback. But they began to share how just that 2% meant an extra $20 or $30 in their paycheck, and what that might mean when coupled with rising gas prices and things they had to pay for their children. We all tend to look at things from our own angle, from our own self-interest. And yet what this parable is telling us is that we need to look beyond that. We need to stop looking just to ourselves and begin to look at how things affect the other. In King's speech, he mentioned that a person in Atlanta who had been in a car wreck, it was the wife of a fairly wealthy person. And the husband's first question after that wreck was the car okay? This week we had a terrible accident, two of them, one on I-275 here and one on I-75. And as I thought about King's words this week, I wondered how many people, when they got that call, followed up with, how's the car? How's the truck? How's the SUV? Instead of, how are the people inside? How are the people around you? Is anyone hurt? Is anyone in need? We're not that different from the fool in the parable. Luke 12 and King rightly remind us that we need to guard against looking at life only through the lens of self. We need to focus on what is within and not worry so much about what is without. On the first point, what is within is important and what is without does not matter. But later in his address, King shines the spotlight on the poor, the oppressed, the victim. And he lifts up those who are without. He makes a twist. So in the beginning, the without is the bad part. But at the end, those without are who we should be focused on. It gets a little tricky to remember. Regarding religion, King says it is not enough to simply worry about the souls of people. If that's all we're here to do today is to save your soul, then we've missed it. Because people are more than just a soul. People have needs, physical needs. This week it's been bitter cold. And many of our brothers and sisters are out there in the elements. Whether they're sleeping out there, whether they're having to go to work out there, taking the bus out there. People are exposed to challenges. What about those people? Those who are with, like the fool in Jesus' parable, need to rightfully remember those who are without. King says, it's all right to talk about the streets flowing with milk and honey in heaven, but I want some food to eat down here. It's all right to talk about the New Jerusalem, but one day we must begin to talk about the new Chicago, the new Atlanta, the new New York, and the new America. Here in Cincinnati, in Walnut Hills, the spotlight shines on things that are getting better, things that are being improved. I noticed on McMillan they're continuing to work on the old historic firehouse. And it looks like a neat project, and it looks like it's going forward well. I think about the growing arts community on Gilbert. Our son Robert had a birthday party of a kid who lives in Lower Price Hill, and it was in Walnut Hills yesterday at the New Soul Glassworks. And I was pretty proud. I was pretty excited. The kids from all over the city from his school were coming to Walnut Hills to go to a birthday party and to see this neat art community that is emerging here. I'm excited about the dozens of old homes that are beginning to be restored. But sometimes we only see what we want to see. And sometimes I just see a city and a neighborhood that is renewing itself, one property at a time. But at the same time, here in our neighborhood and here in our city and here in our wider community, there remains another reality. I suspect these are the lost King talks about. There is a part of Walnut Hills, there is a part of every community that we tend to avoid, that we tend to not go through. Or if we go through, we try to get through really fast because we don't want to see too much. We don't want to see what's going on there, what people are facing there. Some would say those are the parts of the neighborhood where we lock the doors and we try to speed on through. Yet those who inhabit even those places are our brothers and sisters. This part of the neighborhood is also part of God's creation. I want to show you a video. And it's kind of I think, a pretty neat video. We're going to watch it. There's a couple of words you might not love, but for the most part, it's pretty good.